Hello there, my name is Valerie, and today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in November. I read 6 books, and I quite enjoyed all of them, which was a huge improvement on the books that I read in October. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of these books and what I thought of them. So first up, I read The Scorch Trials by James Dashner. This is the sequel to the dystopian novel The Maze Runner. It's hard to say much about this book without spoilers, plus I read the third and final book in the trilogy this month too, so I'm just going to hold off and tell you my thoughts on the whole trilogy when I get to that book. But I do believe I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Pyramids by Terry Pratchett. This is a standalone book in the Discworld series, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was a little concerned going into it and at a couple moments that it was going to veer too close to being just a stereotype of ancient Egyptian culture, but for the most part this was just a fun book with puns and some interesting discussion of religion and, you know, following in your family's footsteps and ritual, and it was mostly puns. Like, there's a lot of puns in most Terry Pratchett books, but this one seemed like he just completely upped his pun game. The name of the mythical kingdom that the main character is from is this word right here, that I'm gonna put right here somewhere, spelled like that. But if you try and say it out loud, it's definitely Jelly Baby, which, thanks to Doctor Who, I am aware that that's a British candy of some kind. So that was silly. Briefly, this is about a young boy who is from a clearly analog of ancient Egypt in the Discworld, and he's training to be an assassin, and then something happens that requires him to go back to his homeland of Jelly Baby, and things escalate from there. So it was very interesting, and there's so many puns. There's so many puns. But yeah, it was quite good. In fact, the only thing I truly hated about this book was this atrocious cover. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to start with this cover. It's so bad. Like, the art style is just ridiculous, and like, I know this woman wasn't wearing much clothes in the book either, but this just is not practical clothing to be wearing on a camel. So, I don't know. I really didn't like this cover. But you know, they say never judge a book by its cover, and this was a pretty good book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So the next book I read was Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. This is kind of a memoir, kind of talks about her childhood and basically her whole life up until the point that she wrote this book, which she wrote, I think, 2008, somewhere in there, 2009. I know it was after 2008 because there's a whole section at the end that talks about her portrayal of Sarah Palin on SNL, and that part's hilarious. And she also talks about 30 Rock. If you haven't seen any of 30 Rock but have an interest in seeing it, I would watch 30 Rock, or at least some of it, before you read the book, because the chapter on 30 Rock will make more sense and be more entertaining. But if you haven't seen 30 Rock, then, and you don't have any interest in it, then it'll still be funny. You'll still enjoy it. But I really enjoyed this book. It's super funny, and I just really like Tina Fey. She talks a little bit about feminism at points, and how there was at one point when she was working for Second City, a comedy group in Chicago, they told her that no one wanted to see a conversation between 2 women, and I thought, oh my god, that's terrible. Like they were purposefully not trying to pass the Bechdel tests. So if you like Tina Fey, you'll probably like this book, so definitely check it out. I think I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads as well. Okay, The Death Cure by James Dashner. And again, I apologize that I'm covering up the bottom of this cover, but it's got the name of the library on it, and this is going on the internet, so but this is the last book in the Maze Runner trilogy. Well, there's a prequel too, but this is the last one in the actual trilogy, and now that I've finished reading it, I'm so torn about what I think about the whole series as a whole, and it's really hard to say why without giving away spoilers, but I'm gonna attempt it. So if you've read the books, hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about. On the one hand, they were super action-packed, they held my attention. I think I read them in a couple days each, both The Scorch Trials and The Death Cure, and there were some fascinating themes about memory loss and trust, and whether or not the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Yes, I just quoted Star Trek. And even a little bit about discrimination. So yes, there were some very interesting aspects about this book that kept me very engaged with it. And when I first finished this book, my first thought was just kind of, well, that was pretty great. but it's been a week or two now, and the more that I think about it, the more there are a couple things about the end of this book that I was not a huge fan of. So, number one, at the very end, knowing what I know now, the entire series just seemed very elaborate, like unnecessarily elaborate for what it was. I feel like this whole journey happened with the characters and then not much really came of it. And then the other thing I wasn't a huge fan of was that a few pages before the end, something major happened, and I was surprised that it was kind of glossed over as much as it was. I felt like it was glossed over way more than it should have been, considering the rest of the trilogy and what had happened prior to that. Or that I think that it maybe shouldn't even have happened at all. I just was surprised that there wasn't more of a reaction to that incident. So that's my attempt at my non-spoilery thoughts on this book. I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars because I still thought it was pretty well written and I thoroughly enjoyed reading them. But if you do read them, and I think you would like them, if you like dystopian novels, I would give them a shot. But just go into it knowing that it's like Lost, which is, by the way, one of my favorite TV shows. Don't go into it expecting to get answers to all of your questions. Speaking of questions, next I read A More Beautiful Question by Warren Burger. This is a short nonfiction book that I stumbled across when I was looking for business books online, because that's a genre that I've been interested in recently. This is a really fascinating book about, as you may imagine, the importance of asking questions and asking good questions. It talks about the importance of asking questions in innovation and in the workplace and even in your own personal life. I thought this was very well written. Some parts of it didn't particularly apply to me. I have no intention of inventing something and starting my own company, but even the parts that were about other people that did do that were very interesting. Overall, it basically talks about how in the workplace and in our personal lives, we sometimes fall into the rut of just doing something because we've always done it that way and not really asking, well, why am I doing it this way? Or even asking, why am I doing this? And asking questions like that of ourselves can really have a significant impact on our lives. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, I would highly recommend this book. There's a lot of stories in the first section about how different things were invented, and that in and of itself was really fascinating. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, I would definitely check this book out. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads as well. And the last book I read this month was Little Bee by Chris Cleave, and it destroyed me. I picked this up at a used book sale at the library a few months ago, kind of on a whim. I saw it on Goodreads or something and thought it looked interesting, and it seemed to be pretty critically acclaimed, so I thought I would give it a try. And then the other day, I wasn't sure what I felt like reading next, and the back of the book was so vague that I didn't want to be spoiled on it in the future, so I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and read this so that I don't get spoiled on it. And oh my goodness, I am still not recovered from this book, I don't think. I mean, I started reading it not really having hardly any idea what I was getting into, and within a couple pages there was definitely a sentence that punched me in the gut. So I'm going to give you a little more insight overview into what this book is about so that you know what you're getting into if you decide to read it. So this is about a 16-year-old Nigerian refugee to the UK named Little Bee. At least that's the name that she goes by. And she and another woman, a British woman named Sarah, are both haunted by a day that they met on a Nigerian beach 2 years ago and what happened that day. And the rest of the book is basically about that. So just so you know, this is an excellent book, but it is not always a comfortable read. There are sections that are quite violent, and there were definitely a lot of sentences that basically crushed my heart. It's about the experience of refugees, Nigerian and from other countries, both in their home countries and in the Western world. It's about discrimination and racism and misogyny and evil, and believe it or not, a little tiny bit of hope. I really enjoyed the writing style of this book. It was quite different. There were a few points where it seemed like he was going for some kind of metaphor and I just wasn't getting it, so I kind of skimmed those paragraphs, but it would just be for, a paragraph and then it would get back to the narrative. But overall, I enjoyed the writing style of this. This was a really poignant book and really made me think about the Western world and how there are things that we think don't have an effect on us or that we don't affect when that is definitely not the case. So for the most part, I thought this was a very well written book. Some may think that the message was a bit heavy handed at times, but I didn't feel that way. I felt like it fit with the story. So this was a very thought-provoking book. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, but not enough to where it spoiled my feelings about the rest of the book. So because this was such a powerful book for me, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend it. So those were the books that I read in November. I'm hoping to do a lot of reading in December. Might have some time off from work, so I actually already finished one book this month. This was a really short book that I decided to pick up like a week ago, and I finished it yesterday. So I'll be talking about this more in my December wrap-up. I'm also reading The Weed That Strings the Hangman's Bag by Alan Bradley. This is a murder mystery, which I'm really enjoying so far. I really like his writing style. And the other book that I'm currently reading is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban in Spanish. So I've read the first 2 in Spanish and they were super fun, so it's really helpful to read books that I've already read in Spanish because, you know, when there's a word I don't know, a lot of times I can figure it out from context because I've read Harry Potter so many times. So I'm looking forward to this. I've read 2 chapters so far, but I'm hoping that over the course of the month I can finish this one too. So that's all I have for today. I actually already have some ideas for some other videos that I'm going to be doing shortly, so look forward to those. So I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.